Hi, welcome to Conversations with the Candidates. I'm your host, Walt Kosmowski, and with me today is mayoral candidate Wes Slate. Wes, welcome. Good to have you here.
Thanks, Walt.
Wes, I'm going to start right off and ask you, as a candidate for mayor, in your opinion, what do you think are the most pressing issues facing our city today?
Well, I think there are two, Walt. I think, first of all, continuing the projects that Mayor Scanlon has in the pipeline right now, and those are four major projects. The middle school, the Route 1A reconstruction from the Beverly-Salem Bridge all the way to North Beverly, around the Memorial Building. The whole Brimble Avenue interchange project, which has gotten a lot of attention lately and which is ongoing. As we tape this, we have a meeting, continuation of the public hearing Monday night.
Correct.
So that's a real current issue. And also, of course, the waterfront. So those are the big projects that Mayor Scanlon has that the next mayor will inherit, because none of those projects will be completed on January 6th. But then there are the other things that the new mayor needs to deal with, and in my view, I would look to deal with. And those include the further development of the downtown and in implementing the vision of a vibrant, active downtown that is not only busy in the evening. Well, we're very successful. We have very successful restaurants in downtown Beverly. It's difficult to get parking, particularly on Cabot Street, on the weekend nights from Thursday on, which is a good thing. The parking lots fill up and the streets fill up and the restaurants are busy. But also business during the day and more people living in the downtown area, which will generate more business. That's one thing. The continuing to work on the schools. The schools are going to get continue to get a lot of attention because currently we have an acting superintendent, the former superintendent and assistant superintendent both retired. So there's a leadership vacuum at the top, even though we have a very experienced interim superintendent there. I mentioned the downtown, and I didn't, and I should have mentioned also the arts community, which is a big part of that. Montserrat College of Art, which sits in Ward 2 that I represent, which I have a terrific relationship with, has a real strong idea of what needs to happen downtown to increase enrollment at the college and expand the college in a modest way, but also integrate that with the downtown area. And finally, some kind of nuts and bolts issues. We are sorely understaffed in public services, public works, and also the police department and the fire department. Our new interim chief, Chris Negrati, who just as I said, as we tape this, I think is actively
just since yesterday.
Pretty much today is his first day as interim chief, has said publicly that he's down about 15 positions on the police department. Fire department, Chief Cotter is no different. I don't think he's down 15, but he certainly needs more people. And Mike Collins over on the public services side is tight on that. And also the other piece of that is the infrastructure of the information technology, the networking and computers and laptops and PCs and smartphones and all the devices that in business we use those things every day to conduct business. And the city does to some extent, but we're not where we should be in those areas. So there's lots to do. It's also critical, even though the economy's a little bit better. The mayor told us when he brought the budget in that this was the easiest one he had done in 18 years. There are still many people in Beverly and throughout the state and the country that are hurting economically. And we have to be mindful of that when we set the tax rate, when we make decisions about projects. Just like in your own home or in your business, you can't do all the things you want to do or should do, so you have to pick and choose the things that are most critical. And so that's It's a big job. There's a lot to do.
Well, there is a lot to do. You've enumerated a lot of things. I'm just thinking, do you want to be the guy in the hot seat come to January? But it's interesting that you mentioned these development projects, because my next question has to do with looking at some of these and getting your feel on this. The Memorial School redo and then surplusing the Briscoe School and so forth. What's your feeling on that project?
Well, it's ironic. I've said to people publicly, and I certainly haven't talked about this with my opponent, but we'll have plenty of chances to do that in the next couple of weeks. I don't think we differ on that. There's agreement that we need a new middle school. It makes the most sense to develop the memorial site simply because the city owns 17 acres in and around that building. Whereas the Briscoe site is landlocked. It's 6 acres. And the only way you could expand that, if you think of it, there's a road on one side, a road on the other side, and then neighborhoods, residential homes on the other 2 sides. So you can't move the roads because of the railroad tracks and other things.
Yeah.
You'd have to take people's homes by eminent domain. That's not going to happen. Yeah. So by the condition of the building, the amount of space available, Memorial makes the most sense. The School Building Authority officials are actually coming to Beverly next week as we tape this for a site visit to really take a hard look at the Briscoe site and the Memorial site to see for themselves what there is to work with. They've been here before, but this is a more formal part of that. I believe it's a 5-step process, and we're going into step 3 to see exactly what needs to be done and what can be done, and therefore where we sit along with all the other communities that want school building authority money to do their projects. So we're very optimistic. I know the mayor and the school committee president, Maria Decker, have worked really hard on that, and they'll be part of that group that visits next week.
What would you the Briscoe building? Okay, once that's once the students are out of there and in a new memorial building, what's your vision for what we should do with that?
Well, the general feeling on it is that it should be sold off to be developed as condos or offices or some kind of residential development or commercial development. Frankly, I have thought myself, and I've heard a few people say, I think it would make a terrific site for a city hall. It's a great building. It's very well built. The inside needs a lot of work, but it's big enough, and particularly the auditorium is a beautiful, if properly restored in the way that this building, or parts of this building were done, where we are here at the high school. I think it could make a terrific venue for almost in the same way that the city of Lynn did with their City Hall auditorium, for performances and shows and activities and meetings. And the benefit of the building is its size, that you could finally locate pretty much all city departments in that one building. I don't know that that's possible or likely politically. But I think it's something that should be considered. And I certainly, when I take office in January, that's certainly something I would look at to see if it makes sense economically and on a practical basis.
Now, Wes, you also mentioned giving that building over and seeing if it could be developed. Let me ask you a kind of a question here. Devil's advocate question. The McKay building. It's been sitting around. That was the plan for the McKay building. What's happened? What would you do with the McKay building if you came in as mayor?
Well, the mayor, I would continue to try to sell it as the mayor has. He just said as recently as last evening that the plan is to try to market it again since the condo market and the residential development market has improved a little bit. That's why there's more development now than there has been in the last couple of years. There are some problems with the building, and that's why it can't be used, for example, without major renovation as a police station or some of the other civic uses, or as a school, because like most old school buildings, my old elementary school in Connecticut, and most of them were built using a lot of asbestos. And before you do anything to those buildings, as we had to do in this building, or what remains of this building, that asbestos has to be removed, and that's a very time-consuming, very complicated, and expensive process. And that's so anyone buying the building is faced with that expense and that time constraint before they can really do anything with it. And I think, frankly, that's part of the reason why the city has not received the responses to the RFPs that have been put out before. But it seems to make the most sense for the development of that site and for that building.
Mm-hmm. Now, you also mentioned the Brimble Avenue 128 overpass.
Right.
And I should, as a disclaimer, as you mentioned earlier, we should tell our viewers that we are sitting here on a Friday before a Monday where a continuation of a public hearing is scheduled for City Hall. And of course, there was a big article in today's paper in Salem News by Bill Scanlon kind of going through all the details of that project. Are you in favor of that project? What's your feeling about that Brimble Avenue overpass project?
Well, it's part of a larger picture. My statement in the paper a week or so ago was that I wanted to wait to see what the rest of the process, as the rest of the process developed. I thought it was premature at that point to make a statement, since alone among my opponents, I'm the only one that's in office right now, and I'm going to have to vote on parts of this, not the whole project. There's no up or down vote on whether we do this or not. What's before us on the council right now is, it's been characterized as a land swap that the state and the developer have agreed to that would move the current ramps to make them safer at the exit there by the Northridge Co-op and the Rocky Post, and would swap the land and change the zoning from what it is to what it could be, to allow the development to proceed on a little bigger parcel and also make the ramps safer in the view of the DOT people, Department of Transportation. It's a piece of the puzzle, and I think part of the difficulty that people have had with this is that although the idea of doing something there has been around for quite a while, and like most big projects with the state, I think this one predates my time in office. It's gone on for at least 10 years. No question to anybody up there that lives there, does business there. My day job currently is in North Beverly on Tozier Road, so I'm familiar with that area, even though I don't represent that part of the city currently and I don't live there. But so the traffic is a concern to a lot of people, and the purpose of the exercise is to improve the traffic. If we can at the same time open up land that's currently vacant to commercial development, which will generate more revenue for the city, that's how we can do the things that we need to do that I referred to earlier in the city. The one misunderstanding here, I think, is that the mayor always talks about new growth. And I think people think that's an abstract concept, that it's like open space or transit-oriented development, that are theories, but you know, the connection to the real world is not clear. New growth is a real factor. It's a dollar amount that's generated by building permits and new development in the city that generates new tax revenue that is not subject to the 2.5 cap on increases in the budget, and allows us to do things in the budget that otherwise we would not be able to do. If we say as a community, we don't want any new growth, and there was a former mayor years ago that campaigned, I believe, on keeping Beverly a suburban community. Frankly, the work that's been done in the last 20 years, and certainly since Bill Scanlon's been in office, has been dependent on new growth and an increase in revenue, because at the same time, the other big portion of the budget that we get, what's called local aid, the money that comes back to us from the state, has been decreased and is not even at the levels that it was at in 2002. We took big hits in it then, and it's crept back up but it's still not back where it was. So without that new growth and development like this, and this is a unique project around the city in that there isn't that much other developable land in the city that can be used. So if this doesn't happen, then many of those other things that people want us to do, all the things that I enumerated earlier, we're just not going to be able to do.
Yeah. Well, it brings me to the question, do you believe in new growth at all costs? I mean, you had mentioned earlier that a lot of the departments in the city are understaffed. They don't have the people, the manpower to do what they need to do because of budget. But then the biggest contributor to our budget are real estate taxes and, of course, state fees, which have been going down. So what is your position vis-a-vis growth? Growth at all costs?
No, I don't think I'd be surprised if anybody said yes to that question. Walt, of course, the interests of the community and the interests of the residents and the businesses in the area has to be factored in. As an elected official, I have a responsibility to the people that elected me. In my case, in Ward 2 right now, but also citywide because we're city councilors. So I think what we have to do is look at what's possible, and it really comes down to where are the areas in the city where the zoning that's in place allows for this type of development. You're not going to put a shopping center in the middle of a residential area, but where you have a parcel, as I said earlier, that has been vacant for years, that is zoned already. The developer, by the way, and again, many people may not understand this, but the developer who owns that land currently, if none of this happens, he could build a retail shopping center or office park or something like that on that parcel with the permits that he would get today. Or not today, but as quickly as he could develop the project. What he's looking for and what we're looking for and what the state's looking for is let's give the developer the chance to do what he wants to do. But more importantly, let's get the roads redone so they're safer. Let's get the traffic improved from what it is. Let's get that new growth revenue that will benefit from this. And let's deal with some of those issues in that area that is already zoned for it. The zoning, the land swap and the zoning change that's before the planning board and that we will base our decision based on their recommendation. That's, by the way, back to your original question, that's one of the things that I said in my answer to the paper and whether I was in favor of the project or not. We have not heard yet at all, because from everyone that wants to testify at the public hearing, it will continue Monday night. And I think it will close Monday night. I think we've heard from a lot of people. We'll hear from a lot more. And then at some point, you have to close the public hearing and move on. It then goes to the planning board. They're the experts in this, and they deal with this all the time. They will review it, and they will then give us their recommendation. Now, we don't have to follow their recommendation in whole or in part, but generally, as I said, they're the experts. They deal with this all the time. They deal with the zoning ordinances all the time. We would be foolish. We would be reckless. We would be irresponsible not to listen to what their recommendation is. And at that point, it comes to our Legal Affairs Committee, which is myself, Councilor Troubateris, and Councilor DeLay. We review everything that we've gotten in. We vote on it out to the council, and then the council takes a vote on whether or not to agree to that zoning change and that land swap. That doesn't mean that the entire Brimble Avenue interchange project is now a go. That just means that this one piece of it has been dealt with. There are many other pieces. There will be many, I'm sure, there will be many more meetings on it, and there'll be much more discussion. And one group in particular that's been very active on this, the Montserrat Neighborhood Group, has been very active on social media. They've been very active in bringing people to the public hearing. I am sure there will be many people there Monday night. But our job as elected officials, as we've done in pretty much all the other big issues that we've dealt with, is to take all of that input from all of the people that have an interest in it and have a right and a willingness to speak, and then do our job, which is to make a decision based on our best judgment of what's best for the city as a whole going forward. And I have no doubt that that will happen, hopefully quickly enough that the grant application that's due to the state that will fund this isn't lost, because just to finish that point, there are many other communities with many other projects. If this money doesn't get allocated to us for this project, it's not like it's going to sit on a shelf
Sure.
somewhere for us to
Sure.
wait for it. It'll go poof. It won't be our money, and it will go to another community that has another project that they want.
Yeah. Now let's turn to a project or a kind of an area of consideration which I think affects your piece of the city, Ward 2, and that's waterfront development, because I do think, based upon how I look at it, there's probably no other ward in the city where the waterfront development is really feasible. It really boils down to that area. I mean, in my judgment, maybe you have other thoughts on it, I think that Bass River, Danvers River area there, and the Ventron, so-called, so I don't think that that's particularly, but I think it's basically between the bridge and Tuck's Point, which is in Ward 2.
Ventron's also in Ward 2.
In Ward 2,
and
yes,
part
of
of
course.
the Bass River,
Yeah.
right.
So what is your feeling on the whole waterfront? I know we did this talk about the restaurant that's in litigation
Yep.
and all of that, but even beyond that, we're just talking about one restaurant there. But what do you see as achievable in waterfront development, and is it of a magnitude that it can be developed to a level that it would be a tourist attractive destination?
Well, I think the restaurant is key, and once that happens, it will certainly change that area tremendously. I've told a story before here on these programs that the first time I ran for office 7 years ago now, the one question that people asked me then, because we had not done much of anything down at the waterfront at that point, is, when is the city ever going to do anything with the waterfront? And as Ward 2 councilor, along with Councilor Trubateras from Ward 1, who also has a little piece of that that you mentioned, we sit on the Harbor Management Authority representing the council, which has dealt with this for years and years. We've made a lot of progress down there. I think all the people that came to the Harbor Fest last week that you covered on BevCam saw firsthand all the progress that's been made down there.
Sure.
The recreational marina is all done. The commercial marina was done in the past year. Excuse me. The seawall and the apron and all that really tough work to rebuild all of that has been completed. And the one piece of the puzzle that's missing, well, one little piece, is the walkway, and the state's working on that, but also the restaurant. As you said, that's been held up in court for years, and various appeals by an abutter who has just publicly said, if we don't get what we want, no one gets anything, and has been willing to fight every step of the way. But it's at the appeals court level with 3 judges, and we're hopeful that when they rule on it, and if they rule favorably, which we believe they will, Joe Leone, the owner of the Black Cow restaurant, who has had the only proposal that was submitted for a waterfront restaurant, will go forward with his plan, and the restaurant will be there. Now, what happens then? I'm thrilled to say that the Ventron property, the former, on the other end of Congress Street, the very end of Congress Street, on the other side of the bridge, just this week, the owner of that property came before the Conservation Commission for a proposal to repair the seawall on that property, which is really the first thing he has to do before he can do any development on the property. We've been after them for the last couple of years since their original proposal for condos stopped because the condo market dried up after they got all the appeals, all the permits for it. And once they have the seawall done and they clean up the property, get the buildings taken down there and get it ready to be developed, I think the restaurant and the walkway and the activity on the other side of the bridge will encourage that property to be developed. And I'm also pleased to say that the 2 residential properties that are directly across from that are for sale, and hopefully, like the 2 duplex condos that were built on the corner of Congress and Wellman Street, though that property will be cleaned up and developed, and some new housing will be built there, the value of which will only increase when the Ventron property is improved.
Now, we only have a couple minutes left,
Okay.
Wes, and what I'd like to ask you is, if you're addressing the voters out there, the people of Beverly, and they say to you, Wes, why should we vote for you? Why should we entrust the management of the city to you? How do you answer that?
Well, I have been asked that question a lot, and I think people deserve an answer. The short version is that alone among my opponents, the 3 of us that are up on the primary ballot, I started as a teacher. That's how my wife Georgia Bills and I met. We've been married 35 years now. We have a son, Richard, who's 30, going to be 30 next month, graduate of Beverly High School. And soon after we got married, I started a job with the telephone company back when it was the Bell System, AT&T, New England Telephone, and worked for them for 20 years. My primary assignment was working with federal government accounts, negotiating multi-million-dollar deals with federal government accounts of all types, civilian, military, GSA, classified. I said recently, everything from the local post office to President Bush's compound in Kennebunkport, Maine. The other point was that when we were teachers, I was president of the Teachers Union, I was involved in the Teachers Union, and when I worked for the telephone company, we were management employees, but all of the technicians, the clerical people, the admin people, the business office, the operators were all union members of the IBEW or the CWA. So working with union members and union contracts and union agreements was a big part of the job, and certainly in dealing with the government. As in my current job, right up the street on Tozier Road for Crane Electronics, I also negotiate with defense contractors. Those are our big customers at Crane, who have government contracts. So negotiating multi-million-dollar deals, working with unions, working in business since 1980, that is training that we got at the telephone company better than anyone, that I have that no one else has. And the job of mayor in Beverly, real quickly, I'll tell you a couple of numbers. The budget that we passed this year is $106 million of everyone's tax money. The city employs about 1,000 employees, including the teachers, many of whom, in fact, most of whom are union members. There are 17 department heads or people that report to the mayor that the mayor appoints with council approval. And there are 9 or 10 labor unions. So the job of mayor is really not just because of how Bill Scanlon's done it, but the way it's developed in the last many years is it's a city manager job. It's an executive position. It's not, you cannot please everyone. You listen to everyone, but at some point your job as an executive and as a manager is to make decisions. And guaranteed when you make decisions, there are good people that will disagree with you on whatever you do. And I think you have to be ready for that. You have to have experience doing that. You cannot please everyone. You cannot, as a practical matter, the comment about opening the doors of City Hall and including everyone in the decision-making process, it's a wonderful concept, and it would be a beautiful place to live. But as a practical matter, in a city of 40,000 people, that's why we have representative government, and people are elected to do the job as mayor, councilors, school committee members to make those things happen.
Mm-hmm. Well, Wes, thank you very much for joining us. Thank you very much. And you have been watching Conversations with the Candidates. I'm your host, Walt Kosmowski, and we'll see you next time.